Good morning, everybody. It is 9 o'clock on the Pacific time here, and we are going to start our Telerik Red Grid paging, sorting, and filtering. My name is Lino Tadros. I am the Chairman and CEO of Falafel Software, and I will be taking you for the next hour and a half through all these nifty features for paging, sorting, and filtering in the Red Grid for ASP.NET. And I just wanted to ask maybe Jonathan and Kevin, I only received one message just to make sure everybody can see the screen and hear me okay. If you can just put something in the question and answer window, that would be great. Good to go. Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. All right, thanks. All right, sounds like everybody can see me okay, so I'm just going to go for it. All right. My name, as I said, Lino Tadros, Chairman and CEO of Falafel Software. I've been a C# MVP since 2004. I used to be a member of the Delphi and C++ development team at Borland, if you remember that company. And I've actually worked as an architect on a lot of different projects in Wall Street, on Morgan Stanley, and also here in Johnson & Johnson, Bank of America, a lot of different states. I've been a permanent member of the VSX team at Microsoft. That's the team that actually integrates with Visual Studio. And I have been dabbling with a lot of different technologies in the last few years, mainly web technologies, WCF, Serverlite, WPF, all the ASP.NET stuff, SQL definitely. A lot of the Telerik products, as a matter of fact, all the Telerik products as of today, including also the WebUI Test Studio testing tool that Telerik has. All right, the logistics of this class, folks, is that we are going to go from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. I'm going to leave the last 15 minutes for questions and answer. So I'm not going to be able to answer questions during the first hour and 15 minutes, but I will definitely go ahead and answer your questions in the last 15 minutes. Make sure you enter your question as soon as they appear into the questions window. And after the first hour and 15 minutes, we will go through them in order. Also, this video will be compiled. It usually takes a few hours, and after that I usually send it to Telerik, and they will be placing it on the tv.telerik.com. Within usually takes a day to 2 days maximum, and hopefully we'll get it in there. Okay? So this is the agenda for today, and I have to be very honest with you. This agenda should take between 5 to 6 hours to actually go through. We're going to condense that in about an hour and 15 minutes. The Red Grid paging, I'm going to talk about the designer paging. I want to spend about 2 to 3 minutes on each one of these topics as far as the designer paging. I'm sure you're here not just to see the designer, but you want to see some customized paging and sorting and filtering to do it in code and so on. So we're going to concentrate on that today. After the designer paging, we'll talk about the SEO paging, and then we'll do some custom paging, and then we'll do some programmatic paging as well. Once we get to sorting, we'll also spend a couple of minutes on designer sorting, and then we'll talk about multi-column sorting, and we'll spend the rest of the time for sorting on sorting expressions. And finally, we'll spend some time with designer filtering for a couple of minutes, but we'll spend most of our time in the custom filtering inside of the Red Grid for ASP.NET. Alrighty, and believe it or not, I'm done with my PowerPoint. Yay! All right, let's go ahead and open up Visual Studio and go right for it. I'm going to start a brand new project in here. And we are going to go for maybe to the Telerik. I could have started a regular web application or a website and add everything manually, but Telerik, gratefully enough, adds for the web C# or VB.NET websites and web application. And that saves you time to actually add all the different jQueries and the script managers that need to be in there, and all the stuff that has to be added to the web.config file to make this stuff enabled. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a C# web application. I'm going to use C# language for this class, but everything I'm doing, you can do the same thing in VB.NET as well. So we'll talk about March webinar, and we'll say OK there. And that will generate a lot of different code in here. I'm going to tell it to use one of the skins. For instance, let's use something fun in here. Let's the hey one is fine. And I'm going to use the rest as the default. Hopefully you're familiar with that. If you're not familiar with how all the stuff works, there is a lot of videos on the tv.telerik.com that shows examples of what this is all about. Alrighty. So at this point, we got the references. Notice that the Telerik Web UI is in here. It created a default of ASPX page. And now I'm actually ready to create a new page that has the red grid. So I can actually do that myself by dragging the red grid and all that. But again, Telerik have actually done some wizard and extensions of Visual Studio to make this very easy for you. So if you right-click on the project and say Red Controls for ASP.NET Ajax, I can go in here and say Red Grid Template. If you want something that has the exports for PDF and XLS files and so on using client-side or server-side, all these things are available for you in here. I'm just going to go ahead and click on the grouping Enable Red Grid. That actually brings in most of what I need inside of there. So we'll say, for instance, webinar paging, and that will be, I will use a C#, we'll use everything else as a default. You can choose, of course, if you would like to do all the expanding and collapsing for the grouping client side or server side. We don't care. We're not going to be spending any time on grouping on this one. And also you would be able to hook it up to an Access database or a SQL database or using Link or using an object data source or an XML. In this one in here, we'll use a database. I'm just going to hook up to my SQL Express on this machine. Let's hit something simple like the Northwind database. We'll save the connection. And now I can actually build my select, update, insert, and delete. Let's just go ahead and use something as simple as customers, for instance, from Northwind. We'll bring in everything and we'll say OK. All right, and that would be the last time we've seen something like this today. We won't spend any time on this. All righty, so let's take a look what exactly got generated for me in here. What generated for me, as you can see, all the script references for the script, for the Red Script Manager, so I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And also the Red Ajax Manager with the update control and everything has been done for me. There is my data source, and the red grid will be in there as well. So we should be in good shape. If I actually just want to test this, I can run this application really quickly in here, and it will in debug mode. And Chrome actually is my default browser on this machine, so it will just load the webinar paging. And as you can see in here, the Hey skin is being used, and the grouping is already built in, but there is no paging. As you can see, the entire data set came in for me right away. All right, so let's start talking about that paging inside of the Telerik Red control. So first of all, if I go to design mode, notice the grid in here has a smart tag. If I click on this on the side, I can see that I can enable paging. So without any code or any declarative code or anything like that, I can just enable the paging. Notice in design time, I can see that the pager is already being initiated in design time. So this is really everything I need to do in here. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you automatically out of the box what we get out of that. We'll run it again really quickly. And as you can see here, it automatically found out that it has 91 total records inside of this data set. And the default was 10 per page, so it used them in 10 pages, so the last page would have only one item in it. And it actually used also the numbers of the pages in here for you. And it also gives you another options, which is the page size if you want to have 20 per page, 50 per page, and so on. So if I say 20, for instance, that will automatically load 20. That makes it 5 pages only on the side. And you can go to the next page by clicking next, like this. For instance, I go now onto the second page, or I can click on the last page, which will probably have only one. Oh no, we'll have a few more records right there. If I do this based on 10 records, for instance, the last page will probably be only one record. There you go. That's what I was expecting. So all the stuff is built in for us, and everything is hanky-dory. All right, so let's go ahead and close this, and let's take a look a little bit more customization for how we might want to treat this specific pager, for instance. Again, I'm going to spend another minute in a designer just to show you what you can do with this at design time. So I'm going to click on the property builder in here from the smart tag. Notice that when you click on the master table, which is the view that we're looking at right now, there is a paging happening right there in the selected object for the property page for paging. And let's go ahead and dissect what's going on in here. I can actually allow paging. If I turn it off, of course, paging will go away. If I say allow custom paging, that means I am going to be doing all the work myself. So I'm going to spend some time on this in about a couple of minutes. For right now, let's talk about the page size. I said I wanted to have the default as 10 records in the page, and you can change that. We can put 15 here if you would like. The show navigation buttons and the position. Notice right now it only shows at the bottom of the page. I can actually choose the pager to show at the top of the page, or I can actually show it on the top and the bottom of the page. So let's do that. Show it on both sides, top and bottom. The mode is very important, folks, because it has actually ramification for you when you're going to write code as well, because it changes the kind of controls that will be enabled inside of the pager. So you can use next, previous buttons. So if I click on that, notice when I apply this, for instance, the pager here in Designer will not have the page size. It will only have a next and previous. That's about it. And I can say just page numbers. That means I will only see 1, 2, 3, 4, all the numbers that I can click as a button, for instance, to be able to get to that. I can say I want to see next, previous, and pages. Or I can get the one that has next, previous, pages, and advanced. Advanced here is the one that you will be able to see the page size, for instance, and all these nice little things. Advanced will also allow you to get more advanced stuff, like entering the number of the page that you want to go to and click on go, for instance. All the stuff will be built into it. And finally, you can get a slider. So instead of having any of these buttons, you can get a slider so you can move right and left to be able to move to whatever page you want. Let's, for instance, go ahead and click the big one here, which is next, previous, pages, and advanced. And we'll say OK there for a second. And then you get a lot more stuff. I'm going to run this really quickly in here and see what we get based on that. And notice there is a lot more stuff. On the right side of the page, we do have item 1 to 15 of 91. So there is 15 now per page, not 10, because I changed that. I still have the previous and the next, last, and first buttons. And I also have all the numbers of the pages that are available for me right in here. Okay? Notice also I can actually use the advanced portion, which is instead of actually going one by one, I can say, for instance, number 4 in here, which is the 4th page, and I can click on go, and that will automatically take us to the 4th page. As you can see, it is highlighted. And the page size, I can move it as well. Instead of using from a drop-down, I can specify exactly. I say, for instance, I want page size to be 14, for instance. And that will make all the stuff. A lot of the questions sometimes that happens on the forum, people say, like, I end up with like 200 pages. I don't want 200 of these to show up, like 1, 2, 3, all the way to 200. It will look really ugly. Well, the default is 10, but if you want to change it, it will put the amount that you want. Let's say, for instance, I put that 4 is the default, is the page number that I want to see. It will say 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it will put dot, dot, dot. So it will not actually count for the whole thing. And the way you would actually do something like this will be on the property builder. Of course, all these things are available in the properties of the grid itself and the object inspector, but easier to actually do it from the paging. And that is the numeric buttons right in here. So if you choose that, let's say, for instance, we use, let's go to master page in here. We'll go to this guy. Let's say, for instance, I put 4 in here, and I'll say OK. Once I say 4 and run this again, hopefully our pages will only show 4. There you go, and then the dot, 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 so you don't have to actually see all the names, all the numbers of the pages in front of you at all the time. So, all right, so we're done with the designer at this point. Now we're just going to go ahead and concentrate really on things that we can do to this specific grid using paging in code a little bit. So let's go ahead and start. First of all, if I don't want to show the number of items in here, maybe I want to show it somewhere else, or I need the amount that got fetched from the database, which is this 91 in here. How can I actually retrieve this really easily? Well, the best place to retrieve this is on event. It's called the item data bound event, for instance. Of course, you can get it from other places as well, but most of the code that you'll see on the Telerik website, for instance, they will get that from the data bound event. So let me go ahead and go back to the grid. In here, if you click on this yellow button in here, you get all the events of the red grid itself. And the one I'm interested in is the item data bound event right there. If you double click in here, it will take us, it will implement the item data bound event with the object sender and the grid item event args-e. And inside of here, you can actually decide what you want to do with every single grid item inside of here. So the reason why I'm saying this is because there is so many different grid items. There is the headers, there is the footers, there is the pages, there is the filters, there is the groupings. All these are different grid items that are being rendered on the screen. So you're going to have to write some code in here to specify which item are you interested in manipulating at this time. Okay? So first thing you will do, will say an if statement, and we'll say if e dot item is, and here what you're going to ask yourself, what is the grid item that you're looking for? So for instance, in our case in here, we're looking for the grid pager item. Once you have actually access to this pager item, which is the entire pager, as a matter of fact, I can do whatever I want. I can say page dot title, and I can make that equal to e dot item as grid pager item, and we are just typecasting this to paging dot data source count, so I can get the entire data source count right there, and I can actually maybe put this stuff to string so I can see it in the title of the page. Okay, so this is not that big of a deal, of course, when we do this, because we're getting all 91 items, but I want you to think about this, what will happen when we do custom paging. So I want to do an on-demand loading, and I want to do paging on demand. So this is a good idea to find out how many records are coming back in that view that I'm actually bringing back from the database, so my paging works well also with on-demand in the future, whether I'm using WCF services to bring me the data. Maybe I don't want to fetch 10,000 records at the same time. Maybe that performance-wise is not feasible. So this is the kind of stuff that you will need to do to get the paging count. This is not the data count. This is the paging count, how many are being fetched to get this data. So let's go ahead and compile this for a second in here. And notice when this runs, the title of the page itself will contain this information. Notice in the title here, all the way at the top, it says 91. So I was able to get this information. It's already available for me. It's a simple example in here, but I was able to get to that on item data bound, and I was able to display the 91 in the title of the page all the way at the top there. Okay, so now we are going to go talk a little bit more about the allow custom a little bit. So if I go back to my my grid in here, notice that when I'm actually go to the open property builder in here, go to the master page and go to paging. If I actually click on allow custom paging, okay, that means not only I'm allowing the paging, but I'm also allowing for the custom paging as well. I'm going to leave the page size equal to 15 and the top and bottom and all that good stuff. I can leave it, but by just saying that I'm allowing custom paging, two things are happening right now. I'm actually saying that I'm going to take control of displaying the page control if I want to. If I don't like the way actually Telerik is doing their next and previous, I want to put other controls. Maybe I want to put a calendar in there. Maybe I want to put a timer in there. Maybe I want to do whatever I want. I'm telling the system now I'm going to do some custom paging. Of course, if I actually just do allow custom paging and say OK there, and I run this, you might be actually shocked to see what the result is. Just by doing that, look what happens on the screen. Where is the pager? Pager is gone. So the pager will not show up if we do this. And that's because the system is expecting you to actually be doing some kind of custom paging automatically. So, and notice also that it's 0 for the paging coming all the way at the top here. So there is no code at all. Why do you think that is? Okay, let's go ahead back in here and tell you the secret about allow custom paging. For allow custom paging to work, folks, one thing really has to happen, which is the needed data source has to be implemented in your code. Okay, every time the grid or the pager needs to get information to find out where it is or what it needs to load, it will have to call into the event for needed data source. This guy in here says needed data source right there. Okay, so I know for a fact that the needed data source will have to be implemented. So let me go ahead and get you some code to explain here what exactly we're going to do. First of all, I'm going to actually create a little function in here. Let me explain this code. This function here is called getDataTable. I need to return a data table, and I can use the same connection string that I'm getting from my file. So I have already a connection string based on the data source one that I created earlier, but I'm going to actually need a SQL connection and a SQL data adapter and adapter. There is multiple ways you can do this. You don't have to do it this way exactly, but this actually is the way that Telerik actually is implementing in their samples to encourage people to use. Also, for us to be able to use these things, I might actually need the system.data.SQL client. There you go. And that actually would take all the red tags away from me. So there we go. Notice I actually create my connection. I create my adapter, and I open the connection. I'm just going to go ahead and fill this data table. So whoever is going to be calling my get data table hopefully will pass me a string that has the query that I'm trying to get that will match my connection string as well. So what do I need to do at this point for my need data source? It's very simple. I will go into my need data source in here, and I will do a line of code like this one. For instance, say get data table, I'll do a select customer ID, company name. You can do whatever you want in here from customers, okay? So as long as the connection string is correct, and this is the need data source will be called automatically into the grid whenever it's needed. You already know how to open the connection and make all that stuff happen. All right, I'm going to actually show you a problem with this so that you understand what's going on. I am not using all the different columns from the customer database, customer table in the database. I'm only using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them only. And notice actually if I put a breakpoint in here, for instance, and I'm going to run this code, I'm expecting automatically as soon as the grid needs to display something that this will be called. So I'm going to click on that and notice what's going to happen. Actually, none of that will be hit, and the paging will automatically still not show. But the important part is I'm not getting any of that get data table code. It's still showing me the whole thing straight from the system, from the data source connection that I had earlier. And the reason for that is, folks, is if I have a data source already connected to the grid, that will take precedence more than the need data source. So for me to be able to make this work and hit this breakpoint, let's go back in here. And let's go back to the grid. Notice the data source is automatically connected to the data source 1 here. Let's go ahead and make this none, for instance, right now. Okay, so the data source, once it's trying to display data and it has no way of actually getting the data source, it will automatically call the need data source for me to get this information. So let's go ahead and run this now and see if that will make any difference for us whatsoever. And I'm hoping it will stop on the breakpoint, and it did. Look, there is the breakpoint, so I'm going to take it off, and I'm going to continue running my code. And now the code here is hopefully much better. It's still paging saying 0 because I didn't do any customization for that. I'll show you how to actually turn customization on in a second. But I am getting actually my need data source being called, and my 6 or 7 different columns are showing up correctly, and so on. All right, so let's now get custom paging working for my grid. First of all, what I definitely will need to do is actually to go into the grid properties. Let's click on the grid here. And notice in the properties all the way at the bottom that it's a magical property called virtual item count 0. This virtual item count is the secret of making actually allow custom paging to work. If it's 0, you will never actually even see it going whatever. So we're going to go ahead and put 91, for instance. It means I want to get the whole amount. So let's go ahead and run this and see if this will work. That's because I knew that there was a 91. So you see there is a 91 in here. And the paging is now custom paging. You see at the top and at the bottom of the screen. And I can actually click on next. And it's actually moving and it's doing everything I'm expecting it to do. So we have no problem with that whatsoever. The important part for me probably to show you is that what happens when I make the virtual code in here. Let's say, for instance, it's 80 only. Okay? And I'm going to run this again. Now you get to see how some of the on-demand code can be written for speed, for instance. So notice that the item here is 1 to 15 of 80 items, okay? And that is the 80 all the way at the top. So it only counts on whatever virtual item counts that I was bringing from the database. So even if I go all the way to the end of the record set, I'm actually at number 80, and it's not going to go any further than that. Why is this an important information? because you will need to actually write some code in your need data source to keep track of all the paging as well. All right, so that when you say next page and next page, maybe you can have some smart code written somewhere in here. Instead of just my one-liner in here, you will actually find out the page index. You need to find out if there is more data that needs to be brought in from the database. You will actually call the get data table, passing the page index, and going forward this way. All right? All right. Let's go ahead and actually tell you something also about the page SEO. One of the worst thing actually about crawlers, whether it's coming from Bing or Google or Yahoo, if there is specific information inside of a grid on maybe the 3rd or 4th pages, that is never crawled because the URL is actually not showing correctly for this. Let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to run this page here really quickly. And in here, there you go. See the paging, webinar paging.aspx, but if I click on page number 4, I'm right now on page number 4, but the URL doesn't change whatsoever. That's not a good thing for an SEO, for a crawler, for instance, like Bing and so on. So how can I fix that? The way to fix something like this so that you can actually have a link that gets crawled by Google, for instance, and it will remember where everything is. Let's go to that grid again. And there is a property in here that you can set. Let's go into the master. There is a master table view, and you will notice there is hopefully something called SEO, enable SEO. It's in the pager. Okay, let's see pager. See, that's the problem about having 2 million different properties. Okay, we're looking for pager style right there. So we'll look at it. There you go. Enable SEO paging is turned off by default. Actually, it's not really true. It is not actually turned off by default to false. What's happening is that if you hit it from a web browser like I'm doing it in here, yes, the SEO will not take place. But if you're actually hitting the page using a crawler, Telerik have modified the code that if a crawler is hitting, it actually can recognize if a robot or a crawler is hitting it, and it will automatically turn on the SEO for you automatically behind the scenes. So that's a good thing. But for us here to see what is going on, I'm going to have to actually turn it on myself, and I'm going to go ahead and run this one more time. And this actually error that you're getting in the designer is not, it's just in the designer, but if you run this, notice I'm at webinar paging.aspx. If I go to page number 4, for instance, it will say question mark red grid 1 change page equals to 4, and that will automatically, you can take this, or a crawler can take this and will automatically be able to hit this at any time. So that's definitely a very good thing for us to remember. All right, let's go ahead and stop this for a second. I'm going to go back in here. And now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about how to actually use a template to make all the stuff work. So I'm going to take some HTML code or an ASP.NET code in here, and I'm going to go to my source, and we'll find out where the master table view is, like this guy in here. Okay? And inside of the page's style, or actually inside of the master table view, if I paste this code in here, and I'm going to show you in a second what that means, can highlight this, and you see this button here will format this in Visual Studio 2008 and in 2010. If I click on it, hopefully it will make this look a little bit better. Well, it didn't really do that well. All right, it's good enough. All right, there you go. So we have a master table view. Inside of that, I have a pager template. And now if I have a pager template, I can create any HTML or ASP.NET code that I want. I can put whatever control I want inside of there. And notice now that I'm having a table in HTML, and I'm putting my own buttons and my own link buttons, and I have pages, and I have text boxes, and I can do whatever I want. I even can put my validators. And now I'm actually telling the pager, don't worry about displaying what you're used to. I am taking care of that myself to show you that. The only two things that you need to be aware of is the command name and the command argument passed for each and every one. So you can put whatever you want, but if they want them to work with the pager code built by Telerik, every time you want to do something to the pager, the command name has to always be called page. You cannot change that. So if you want, for instance, a button that will take you to the first, you can do whatever you want. This could be a hyperlink, a button, calendar, whatever you want. As long as the command name is page and the command argument is first, this will serve as the control that will take you to the first page in the pager. Okay. Same thing for this one. If you use the command name page and you use the command argument prev like that, that will automatically mean something to the Telerik engine to take you back there. Okay. What else I wanted to show you in here? There might be a couple more things. Yeah, the command name in here, custom change page, so that if I want to change it, if you have to use exactly the same word, like you can see the custom change page, so that you can do this. If you want to go to the next, if you want to go to the last, again, the command name is always page on these things, but you can just change the name of the command argument. Where do you get all the different available command arguments? It's available in documentation. Once you go to the documentation of the grid on the web, under the Telerik website, there is a whole page with all the different command arguments that you can use. Notice I didn't write any code. This is all declarative code inside of my ASP.NET code, so there is no C# or VB.NET code in here. So let's go ahead and run this and see what I get. Look at that. So now, because I have a pager template item inside of my master page, I'm overriding the entire rendering of that. So I have on the right side of the screen something that says refresh data. When I click on it, it will automatically call a command name with a command argument to refresh the data from the database. I also can go to first, to previous, click on next or last. Let's say, for instance, next in here at the top. And there is my next page. I can see next at the bottom. It's exactly the same code. I can actually change it here. I'll say page number 4, and I click on go, and all the stuff is done for me automatically. Maybe I didn't enter this correctly in the HTML, but anyway, if you have the correct name in here, you'll be able to definitely click on that and move it. Maybe I just misspelled the name of the control, but this is how it works. The main thing is that how to put whatever controls you want inside of here without any C# or VB.NET code. So that's the important part. All right. The next piece is what happens if I want to actually mix and match. I want some code to be written declaratively in the page template, but I actually want to do this in code myself. So let's go ahead, for instance, and show you how to do that. I'm going to close this here for a second, and I'm going to delete all the gibberish that I did for the page template. So let's go all the way down. Page template, delete this guy, and instead I'm going to actually have, let's format this code, make it look nicer. I'm also going to have just these 2 lines in my page template. I'm going to have a link button 1 and a link button 2, nothing else in here. And I'm going to tell the system that I would like to run this or customize this automatically in my code behind. Okay, so let me close this for running from the previous run. All right. So where would you actually do something like this? Obviously, in the pager, when it gets created, I need to tell it what link button 1 and link button 2 will be for the pager. So your best bet, of course, is to go and implement the event for the item created on the grid itself. So let's go back to design in here and go to events. And notice there is something called item created right there. If you double click on it, it will definitely implement the item created for you. And I'm going to bring in a bunch of small little lines of code in here, and I'm going to explain them for you in a second. You will get all that code. Notice I'm going to actually check if the item coming in, the e.item, is the grid pager item. And if it is, notice what I'm doing here. I'm creating my own pager item. I'm actually trying to use the pager item.find control. I want you to remember this because this is the way you will do any customization whatsoever. It's always a find control call that has to happen on the ASP.NET code to find the name. Remember, here we called it, for instance, link button 1 and link button 2. These IDs are the one that I'm using in here to find them in the HTML and typecast them here, or actually using them as link button. I can give them a command name. I can give them a command argument, and I can give them whatever text I want, and I'm doing the same thing with the button 2 as well. So the nice thing on the server side, doing a code behind code, I can actually change this however I want, create as many buttons, as many controls. I'm doing it easy here using link buttons, but think of it as any control that you would like to have in here, as long as you can find this in the ASP.NET itself. Okay, so let's run this code and see what we will see when we run this. This will be a simple one. We'll only have previous and next, I believe there would be nothing else. Yeah, there is a previous page and next page. Just I made it simple, but I want you to think that you can actually put a calendar, you can put a cover flow, you can put another grid in here if you'd like. This is any control that you would like, as long as you hook it up correctly and you give it the correct command name and the correct command argument, you're ready to go. So will it work? Let's click on next page, and there you go. It is working. Click on next page, and it's going to the next page automatically for me. All right. We'll stop this guy. Let's see what else I wanted to show you now. Sometimes when you run the code, notice that I had two of them. I had the one on the top and the one at the bottom. Sometimes you would want to do something different based on if it's rendering itself on the top or on the bottom. So let me bring in some code in here. And I'm going to put it again inside of the item created. Again, I'm duplicating some things in here. Don't worry about that. This is not about the efficiency of the code. I just wanted to show you really quickly what's going on in here. The way the Telerik Red Grid works, it actually always draws specific controls in a specific area on the screen. So, for instance, the grid page or item, whether it's customized or not, the naming containers will always be the grid T head or the grid T foot. Of course, if you're saying I want to see it at the bottom only, then the grid T head actually would never take place. It's always the grid T foot only. Okay? So let's say, for instance, I'm actually going to use this one to say Lino, and I'm going to use this one to say Tados. That means my link button one, which is actually the previous, if it's throwing itself at the top, I can change the text, I can change the command argument, the command name, whatever I want based on this link button, only if it's displaying itself on the top. Also notice that you can change the CSS style and you can make it completely look different at the top of the grid than actually the one looking at the bottom of the grid. Do you see what I'm trying to do in here? All right, so let me run this to let you see what exactly is going to happen based on this code. There you go. So notice at the top there is Lino and there is Tados. Both of them mean previous, but I actually changed them based on where they're being loaded in the grid itself. So if I say next and next again, so now if I click on Lino, I'm going previously once and it's working. And if I click on Tados in here, it will actually go back once more. So this stuff is working. You're just changing these things on the fly based on where they are being drawn on the screen. All right, hopefully that will make sense to you as well. And finally, I'm going to show you for the pages, I want to show you how to do the whole thing based on code instead of declarative at all. So the way I would do it, you would need to create a class, and let's go ahead and create a class in here. Get some code in here to show you. I'm going to go inside of my code in here. Let's go ahead and create a small little class. Oops. There we go. That's better. So if I have a class here called myPagerTemplate, you inherit from the iTemplate interface, and that's available in the System Web UI iTemplate. So notice it's not a Telerik interface. It's actually a Microsoft interface, and you would be able to actually do something like this with no problem to make it work. So right now I have a link button and another link button for the previous and next, and I have a public myPagerTemplate that's available in here. And you have to actually implement something called instantiate in. So let me go inside of this code, and I'll bring it in. There you go. So this is the only thing needed. Creating a class that inherits from iTemplate. Create whatever you want as far as controls. These could be very elaborate controls if you want. We're not going to use the constructor for this one. But the important part is this guy in here. And this guy is the instantiate in based on the container that you can actually create your controls. You can give them an ID. Again, this stuff does not happen in the ASP.NET. It means there is nothing in the page template. You're doing all the stuff in code, and you can load it on the fly using placeholders and stuff like that. So that can be very, very elaborate stuff that you can actually have for your system. Okay. So once I have that, is that enough for the template to take place? Of course not. There is at least one line of code that you can actually tell the master table view to use that pager template. So in the initialization, and the tricky thing is that when, on which event you need to call this guy. So let's go ahead and save this in here. I'm going to go back to my my designer, and if I go down to my events, I want to see something like the init. Init, don't do it on the load, that's too late. You need to do it really early on to make sure on the initialization of the grid itself that stuff will work. So let's go ahead and do this. If I say red grid 1.masterTableView.pagerTemplate equals, and I'm going to instantiate a new instance of that class I just created right here. Okay? So this one will have Lino page and Tadros page. These are the two buttons that I'm going to have. Let's run this and see if it will work. Okay, why did I get a null reference exception? I'm still having the old page template that doesn't make sense to have both of them because it's trying to do a fine control on something that doesn't exist after the initialization. So that makes sense. So let me go ahead and take this code out. I don't need this code right now. I'm doing everything myself. So I'm going to click on comment here. This code will be commented out. And as a matter of fact, I can actually go also to my ASPX code, and I'm going to tell it that I don't need these guys. I'm going to delete this from here. I don't need any templates. All the stuff is handled in the code now. So let's run it again, and hopefully this time we can see this final piece. And there we go. See, we have Lino Tadros and Tadros page. Both of them are next to each other. When I click on this guy, it's going to go to the next page, and it's working. And none of the stuff is available declarative. All the stuff was created based on a template on the fly in the code using C# or VB.NET right away. Sounds good? Okay. Well, the paging is a little bit big, and it took us almost 41 minutes to do this piece, but I knew that this will be important for you, and hopefully you got definitely a lot out of it. I could actually do paging for the next 3 to 4 hours, honestly, but hopefully this will get you going with paging. But if you need some more advanced stuff about paging, please let us know. Send us an email. I'm at lino@falafel.com. Or put them on the forums, or our tv.falafel.com or tv.telerik.com. Both of them will get the information. We monitor it regularly to see what people are definitely looking for. All right. I want to actually start doing a little bit of sorting right now. All right. So let me close this guy, and we'll stop this from running. We'll go to our designer. We'll go in here, we'll do the property builder. I'm going to go to my paging. I'm going to say I don't want custom paging. I just want the regular paging. But the important part out of this is that I'm going to enable sorting straight out of the smart tags in here. Just by saying enable sorting in here, folks, you will automatically be able to see sorting happening right away inside of there. So again, I'm still using, unfortunately, my template, and I should actually turn it off so that you can actually, you know what, this is no big deal. This is not what we're going to be talking about. By enable sorting, folks, I can actually go into company name. Notice that the cursor will change. Now I can click on it to sort it, and you need to understand that sorting in the Telerik Red Grid happens on 3 different levels. The first time you click on it, it will automatically sort this in ascending order, and you will see actually the icon right next to it pointing up, and the tip on it will be sorted ascending. If you click on company name one more time, it will actually reverse it, and the icon will go down, and it will be descending. If you click on it for a 3rd time, that doesn't make it back to ascending. It actually goes to a 3rd state, and that state is none. So in the code, you will need to understand that there is 3 states, not only 2. So if I click on it one more time, now this is the idle no sorting state. So this is the 3rd state available inside of these things, okay? Notice if I want to, for instance, do the contact name right here, it's ascending. If I go click on contact title, because I want to sort on contact name first and then contact title, let's click on that. That automatically ignores contact name, which is not what I want to do. I want to actually respect the first one will be the main one, and then when I click on a different column, it will be the secondary sorting item, and that's not built in by default. So let's go back into our grid in here, and I'll show you how we can actually do that. And we'll go into page property. I'm not sure actually you can do it from here. I think we're going to have to go to the properties of the red grid itself, and I think it's called allow. We'll go to the master page, master view, there you go. And the one we're interested in is right there. It's under the master view, and it's allow multi-column sorting, and it's by default it's turned to false. I'm going to double click in this guy to make it true. And now when I actually run this, notice now from my 7 different ones, I can actually click first on the contact title. And notice for contact title, I have a lot of different accounting managers ascending. But inside of these accounting manager, these are not alphabetized, the contact name. And if I click now on contact name, while respecting the account managers, I'm going to have the contact name alphabetized next to it as well. Okay, so this is available really easy without writing any code or anything, just by enabling the allow multi-column sorting right away in there. All right. Usually when you want to deal programmatically or do some more templates for sorting, you do not want to turn on all these different fields by default. You want to actually add the columns yourself, to be honest with you. So let me show you what we're going to do in here. I am going to go stop this, and I would like to go to the source code. And notice here that there is no columns for the master table view. That means somewhere inside of here, we set that to automatically create all the columns, okay? And that is probably not what you want to do with sorting, and also it's going to be the same thing for filtering later on. So the way to actually get around that, we'll go back to the designer, and we'll go click on the property builder right there. There is my columns, and notice here when I click on the columns for the master table, by default the create columns automatically at runtime will be in there. I'm going to actually turn that guy off. So right now you will notice none of the fields are showing up. And now I'm going to actually bring in my own code. Of course, you can actually use the property builder to do this yourself by going to master table, columns, and you say I want a bound column. You can click on that, another bound column, and choose each and every field automatically. But doing it this way, that means your declarative code in the ASP.NET page will show all the columns one by one. If you choose create column automatically at runtime, none of the columns will show up in the master table view in the code. It will automatically happen for you on the fly. So I'm going to cancel that for right now. I don't need that. And I'm going to show you how we can actually bring in a couple of columns from this data set. So let's go back to the source. Inside of my master table view, let me bring in, we'll format this so you can see it better. There you go. I have a columns inside of the master table view, and I'm bringing in 2 columns. One is a hyperlink column, and one is a template column. That shows you that other than just using a simple bound column, which you just need to give it the data text field, I can actually choose a specific hyperlink column to change the functionality of that column inside of the grid. I'm still going to hook up to a specific field called country, and I'm going to make the sort expression to be country as well. And notice that one of the things that you will need to understand is that if this is a hyperlink column, the sort expression needs to be identical to the data text field. You cannot really change it much. From the templated column though, whatever you evaluate inside of your template, like I'm using the city for instance, that is the one that the sort expression can happen on. Okay, so you cannot sort on something that the evaluation of the template is not using. That doesn't make sense because it doesn't know what this template column is. So again, for hyperlinks, the sort expression and the data text field have to be the same, but for grid template column, the sort expression has to be evaluated inside of the item template that you are using yourself. And again, in the item template here, you can put any HTML, ASP.NET code, other controls, whatever you want in here. Just remember when you evaluate or eval a specific field from the database, that's the one that you need to be worried about. All right. Anybody could guess what's not going to work? I'm using country and city, but I remember when I made a change to my my SQL, if you remember, I did not tell my need data source. I remember correctly. Where did it go? There you go. I didn't tell it to bring in customer, so that will not work. So let me go ahead and cheat here and add country. and city. How about that? Okay. Now by adding these two for the need data source, I know now that this code will work. Okay. So let's go ahead and run this and see what we get out of that. Okay. So these are the only two fields now coming in. Okay. And you will notice also that each and every one of the country fields coming from the database, if I put the cursor over it at the bottom of my Chrome browser, you'll notice that it's trying to go to falafel.com because this is a hyperlink and I can do whatever I want as far as hyperlinking this to whatever I want it to go to. So you can hard code it, you can have this coming from a different field in the database, you can do whatever you want. The nice thing about it, I also told it to have a sort expression on this. Remember, this is not a field in the database, this is a hyperlink field that I created on the fly. So when I click on country in here, notice it will automatically sort my entire hyperlink column that I created on the fly. And if I click actually here on city, it will automatically do that as well on city. This is not a bound field to the database. This is a templated field that the sort expression still worked on that as well. All right? Okay. And another thing is, what if I don't want to allow anybody to start the application with something that is not sorted? See, for instance, in here, if I click on this twice, I'll bring them back to the idle mode. Every time I'm going to run my app, it's going to look like that. City and country are not sorted. So how do you actually set this? You can do it two ways. You can actually do it programmatically, or you can do it declaratively. So let's go ahead and do it the easy way first, declaratively. I'm going to actually go to, close this guy. And I'm going to go into my code here for the master table view. Okay, if I paste these two lines of code for sort expressions, let me format this so you can see it better. So this is what you will need to do. You will need to have a sort expression, and you will actually create a grid sort expression, give it the field name that you would like to sort on, and the sort order, whether it's ascending, descending, or none. Okay, so you have three different sort orders, not just two: ascending, descending, and none. Okay, so if I do this, I'm guaranteed now when this application will start, it will automatically respect the company name, for instance, as far as the ascending. Let's change this so you can see it. We'll make it country, for instance. So it will work based on the code that we've written so far. Let's run this, and notice that I don't have to click on anything. This will automatically be sorted, as you can see here, for countries. And it is true, you can have as many of these sort expressions as you want. You don't have to only have one. You can mix and match however you'd like for all of these guys. Okay? What happens if I do not want to make it happen based on these guys? So let's take these guys out of here. And now I want to do it programmatically based on different logic that I have in the C# or the VB.NET code. So the way this will work, I can actually go to my page in here. Let me save this. And we'll go to page load. There you go. There is my page load. I haven't written any page load code yet, but if I bring in these 4 lines, notice I can use the grid sort expression, give it a name, create an instance of the grid sort expression. I can actually do the expression.field name as country. I can set the sort order to descending. See, if I put a dot here, you have ascending, descending, and none. And finally, it's important to do a red grid master table view sort expressions and add the entire collection of the sort expression to the master table view sort expressions collection. Okay, that means you can have multiple of those. You can have 3, 4, or even 100 different expressions if you'd like, and then add the collection automatically into the master table view sort expression, and it will be respected on the page load right away. So I changed it a little bit to make it descending instead of ascending, so you can see that it actually did take effect. So let's go ahead and run this really quickly. And there you go. You see country right now. Programmatically in C#, I was able to use a sort expression in code to use it descending on the country name. All right. What else can I show you based on that? Yes. One of the things that a lot of people usually ask on the forums as well, notice the 4 lines of code that I've done in here. What is the worst thing in the world that you can do for these 4 lines of code? Is to come in here and do a red grid view, red grid 1 .rebind. You never want to rebind code for the after the sort expression in the page load, for instance. You do not want to do that. Okay, so make sure that there's some things when you use sort expressions on page load and so on, you do not want to rebind. Otherwise, that will cause some infinite loops, as a matter of fact, for this to for the data grid. So that would cause problems, and sometimes it would just not work at all. All right. We have about 20 minutes left, and I have about 2.5 hours worth of material to show, so I'm going to keep going. I'm going to actually show you now how to deal with filtering. So I'm going to go in here, and let me go back to the design and show you how to turn on filtering. And by just clicking on Enable Filtering all the way in here, folks, as a matter of fact, I don't want to actually do this on, I did so much customization with, I'm just going to go ahead really quickly here and create a new page. Let's go and say red grid, this guy, next. We'll say filter grid. That's good enough, whatever. And we can use the same exact connection we've been using, which is the north wind. Query builder. Customer is fine, and we're good to go. All right, that is my new page. It's called Filter Grid right there. And the only thing left for me is actually I'm going to enable on this grid the filtering right here. We'll still enable sorting and paging like we've done before, but this time I'm going to enable filtering. And notice that the filtering is very important because it's going to show up as one of the grid filter item inside of the grid itself. Okay. So with that done, let's see what do we get out of the box right away. All right, there is our grid. The sorting is enabled, the paging is enabled, all that is good. But when I go, for instance, to something, for instance, like city, if I go to filter and start clicking on something like London, so we'll type London in here, notice nothing is happening. I have to go click on the specific filter right there. And once I click on it, this filter menu, and I'm mentioning the name in the code that you need to be aware of. This is called the filter menu, okay? The filter menu will allow you to see every single menu item available for a filter. Although London actually is a string value. It's not a numeric value or a double or anything like that, but it doesn't care. It just showed you the whole thing. So this is, again, something that you might want to customize. So there is no reason for me to say equal to, not equal to, greater than, or less than. These things don't make sense for this. But again, you would probably use something like contains, does not contain, start with, or end with. These make sense to something like city. So I will show you in a few minutes how to customize this so that you can show whatever you want to do. But let's say, for instance, I click on contains. And automatically, as you can see, it filters my grid automatically for everything that has to do with London right away. Alrighty. The other thing that actually I like to use, let's go ahead and close this guy. By the way, for those of you that are asking why when I shut down Chrome this is still running, is because I don't have it working with Internet Explorer 7 or 8. So if you're using Chrome or a different browser, actually the notification system doesn't tell Visual Studio that the browser or the page have closed, so you have to close it yourself. But if you're using IE8, for instance, that will not be the issue. It will close automatically and will stop the debugging anyway. Alrighty, so let's go back to the source in here, and I want to see my filtering. Where is Mr. Filtering? There you go. Filter. Master table view. So there is something actually in the filtering. It's called auto post back on filter. The auto post back on filter, folks, will allow you. Where do I put that? Master table view right there. I think I'm going to have to use a couple of columns. This will just not happen without columns. So let's go ahead and do that really quickly. I'm going to go in here. Oops. No, here. Designer. We'll go to the property builder. And for columns, let's just add a couple in here. And for the data, I'm going to make one of them is city. It's good enough. And this guy would be country. And we'll say OK. Let's make sure everything is still working. Aha. So right now, I didn't actually tell it to turn off the other stuff, but that's fine. That's what I really need. I actually need the country and the city that I created. The reason why I added those so that I can go back to the code and see them being created for me right away. So let's go back to the source, and voila. That is the two columns I created for bound, one for country and one for city. And the important part out of this guy is to enable saying auto post back on filter equal to true. What does this auto post back on filter to true? Notice when I filtered before, nothing happened until I actually clicked on the icon for filtering and I chose contains or do not contain and so on. If you set auto post back on filter equal to true and push enter as soon as you type the word London, for instance, that will automatically trigger the contains right away. You don't have to choose from the list. Of course, sometimes you do not want contains to be the default. There is a way, of course, to change the default to make it whatever you want later on. Okay? So let me just go ahead and run this so I can show you what that means. So if I come in here and we'll say France and push enter, and there you go. See, I didn't click in here, but it automatically meant contains. And it is not because it's the first one, it's because it's the default inside of the implementation. I can actually choose this to be start with, for instance, so that when I push enter, that would be it. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But for right now, this is what the auto post back is doing. The other thing that I like, actually, you can actually do a show filter icon equals to false. Maybe I do not want you to do anything other than just clicking enter. So I can actually come in here into the column right there, and I can say show filter icon equals to false. Not only that, I can actually get pretty nifty with this stuff. I can actually go in here and I can say filter delay 1000 millisecond. It means while I'm typing, 1 second after I stop typing, I want you to launch the filter right away. Okay, so this can actually be very valuable as well. Again, if you want to make this 250, which is a quarter of a second after you stop typing. As soon as you start typing, it will start the resetter again for the delay. So let's do this and see if this stuff will work for us. So notice if I come in here and we'll say, for instance, Canada, and I'm going to stop for 1 second. I didn't click on anything, folks, and after 1 second, automatically this will show up. There is even more advanced stuff you can do with this if you want to have the same look and feel, for instance, that Google has when you try to search, so that a combo box will show up or a list of items showing you what exactly is available based on the first 2 or 3 characters that you're typing in. All the stuff is very possible to do in the filtering with the Telerik Grid. Very, very capable. All right, so we have about maybe 15 minutes left or so, so I have a lot of different samples I want to show you again for filtering. First one I'll show you here is in code now. Okay, we're done with the Toys R Us part. Okay, we're going to get into the code now to actually show you how we're going to get into the grid filter menus itself. Okay, so you've noticed so far when I clicked on the filter, it actually showed contains, does not contain, start with, ends with. What happens if you want to actually localize this to something else? Easy enough. Let's go ahead and get some code in here to show you how to implement this on the page load, for instance. Control C, and I am going to go in here, double click, I'll open up a page load. So in the page load in here, look at a couple of the lines of code. The grid filter menu is the menu that shows up that contains all the different verbs that you can do on the filtering. And what I'm doing in here, I'm actually getting a reference to the red grid one.filter menu, and I'm going through each and every item inside of this menu. There is tons of them, and I'm looking, for instance, the one that says starts with, and I want to actually localize it to Spanish maybe, and I can change this on the fly to hola amigo. Alrighty. So what I'm trying to say here, this of course is hard-coded, but I want you to think of this as something that you load from an outside resource. So you can add an resx file outside of here, and all your start with, contains, and all that stuff can be automatically customized to whatever language you want based on an outside resource. Just to show you that this will work for all the items, all the filters inside of this grid, let's go ahead, for instance, and run this and see if this will work. Now if I go and click on this filter from any of them, notice that the third one down, it says Hola Amigo. It doesn't say starts with anymore. And it happens on all of them. All the stuff is built in now, and I actually changed it to say Hola Amigo on all of them. Okay? The next item would be when you create this whole item, grid filter item, all the way in here. Remember, all this is a grid item that gets rendered in time by the red grid when the children are created for the entire grid. So one of the things that you can do, you can say, I don't like this control. I don't like the background. I don't like the button in here. I want to actually take control of the whole thing myself. So let's go ahead, for instance, and do an implementation for our item created event for the grid. So let me stop this for a second. And we'll go back to our grid in here. Click on events. And there is my item created event right here. Double click this. And in here we can implement these few lines of code. Notice I'm like I did with paging earlier, but this time I'm not looking for the grid pager item, I'm looking for the grid filtering item. So once I know that the item that I'm interested in is the grid filtering item, look what I can do. I can actually create an instance of the grid filtering item in here based on the item coming back to me. And I can actually find the control on the screen and assign it to a text box. So the filtering item for contact name, for instance, I can tell it, use the first control you find inside of that filtering item and typecast it with a text box. I can change the width of it to like 30 pixels, and I can change the background color to red, for instance. Okay? So I just want you to think of this as I use a text box. You can use whatever control you want in here, and what you're doing at the creation time of the grid filtering item is that you're taking control of this and you're overriding whatever you want inside of the specific control. So that means every time an item is being created, if it finds out if it's a grid filtering item, and it finds out it's actually the filtering item of the contact name, and only for the contact name, I want to change the text box to 30 pixels and the background to red right away. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this and see if this will work. And it did. If you look in here, for instance, you will see that the contact name has a 30 pixels. It's not the same width like everything else, and it's red in here. I can still use it exactly the same way like I've done before. I can come in here and say ANT, and I can say Hola Amigo. Click on Hola Amigo, and as you can see, Antonio here will start with ANT, and it worked right away. All right. So far, hopefully so good. And the next piece is what happens when I actually want to create my own grid template for all the columns in the database, but use some JavaScript on the client side for the selected index itself. So if we do something like this, this can actually be pretty powerful. Let me go ahead and bring in some code in here, show you how this would work. I am going to go to this guy, go to the source, and instead of having these columns in here, I'm going to paste some code in here for the columns. And as you can see in here, I'm using a grid template column. This is not a bound column anymore. It's for country. It's using a unique name, country. Okay? And I have a filter template. That's what I'm interested in. This is the beauty of having customization in the Red Grid for Telerik. Is to say to the filtering grid item, forget whatever you want to do. I want to actually build my own filtering right inside of the grid filtering item. It means do not draw anything. I'm going to draw everything myself. Why is this a good thing? It doesn't matter where the data source is coming from. I'm obviously going to use something called entity data source. This could be coming from anywhere, WCF, coming from another SQL database. Doesn't matter. The important thing is I'm not using text boxes anymore. I'm going to use a red combo box. And from this red combo box, I have a selected index change that I'm firing here inside of my JavaScript. And you will notice in this code in here, I'm just getting the client ID of the control, and I'm going to the filter for the country on the specific value that I'm passing from the value of the combo box itself. That means what? That means it will not allow you to type anything for the filter. It will only be a red combo box that has all the items from the country. So you cannot actually enter something that doesn't exist. You have to only choose something from the list that you can filter on. Isn't that pretty cool? it should actually work just fine. The only thing left for me to do here is I need something called entity data source 2 that knows how to hook up to this database. So let's go ahead and do this really quickly. I'm going to say add new item, and there is my entity data model in here. And for this guy, we'll call it North Wind, for instance. We'll say add this guy. Yes, from a database. We'll use the same North Wind connection. I don't want to change any of that stuff. And I'm going to use my customer right there as well. There's the North Wind model. And there is my customer entity being created inside of my application. All right, that sounds good. Thank you very much. Let's save this guy. Go away. And the only thing left in my code in here, folks, is that I need a component that we will need to load this entity data source. I call it entity data source 2, but it doesn't really matter. In the data component here, there is something called entity data source. I'm going to drag this guy. Let's go ahead and put it in right after the red grid in here. And now it's actually including some references and doing all its good stuff in there. You bring it in here. I'm going to change this name to be data source 2, okay, so that I can match whatever I actually created earlier in my code for the grid, entity data source 2. So they are both connected right now. I just need some settings on this guy to allow me to do this nicely. So let's go back to our designer. Click on the configure data source for the entity grid. The named connection is Northwind entities. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, when you see something like this happening, that means that the entity needs to be recompiled for the application so that the other pieces of the application can see it. It's normal, so we'll just have to build so that the entity can be seen. So when you see these problems, that's probably, usually when you work with entities, you have to rebuild. All right, it's done. So now hopefully we can go further. There we go. There's my Northwind, and voila, it sees my Northwind entities. The entity name is customer. I can use an entity filter if I want, but I'm going to leave it empty. The only field I'm interested in, folks, is country, and that would be the content of my red combo box inside of the filter. And believe it or not, I am actually good to go. So what happens now when I run this code based on an entity framework inside of my red grid with a filtering? So let's run this, and if we've done this right, this should be looking pretty cool. All right, there is my new field in here, folks. Notice everything else is still using the old way, but in this one, I took charge of how it's going to be displaying, and in my filter in here, I can actually bring it down, and I can see all the unique, oh, actually, I didn't do a unique here, but I can see all the different countries, and for instance, if I go to USA and click on this one, it will automatically filter all the stuff on USA, and I don't have a chance of actually typing anything. It can only be chosen straight from the filter from the combo box itself. So this example shows you two things: how to do it based on picking from an entity framework EDMX file, or it will also show you based on the filter how you can embed any control. It doesn't have to be a red combo box, any control at all inside of your source code. And the way you would do that, in your filter template right there, you can put whatever component that you want to make this work. Alrighty? And I can't believe we made it on time with the 1 minute to spare. So I'm going to start taking questions, and if there is pieces that I need to go through again, I'll be more than happy to do that. Remember, this video will be available actually on the site for Telerik at tv.telerik.com, hopefully within a day or two max. I'm hoping by tomorrow morning it will be out there. And we'll go from there. Hopefully, I know probably I went very fast, but I just wanted to make sure that you got some value out of this, and it would help you hopefully with whatever you're trying to do. So let's go ahead and start taking some questions, folks. James asked the questions. I'm going to actually stop the recorder now, and I'm going to take the questions.